Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome back to our watch club for Star Wars: The Acolyte. Why do you love people who can only go so far? Who can't go as deep as you can? Welcome back to Watch Club. My name is Nate, and this is our Watch Club for Star Wars: The Acolyte, Episode 6. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Watch Club, our weekly review series, kind of like a book club, except it's way better. Keep in mind, we will be going into full spoilers for this series and Star Wars in general, so if you haven't watched this week's episode yet, be sure to do so, and then come right back in less than 12 parsecs. Now, before we all, take a bath showing off our huge muscles, let me introduce you to the lovely Force wielder joining me today. He's the jovial, jurisprudent justifier of justice. He's Justin, the Jedi-loving Lawrence.
Hello.
Hello.
It's my chimere.
That's your chimere. That's
my,
your
that's
your nice chimere.
That's the nice chimere. Yeah, that's the goof chimere.
What would your sexy chimere sound like? What does he sound like?
Hello.
Okay, jeez, calm down, dude. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, it's getting hot up in here. I might need to take a bath myself. We learned in this episode that the Stranger's helmet, or Chimere's helmet, or we'll probably go back and forth between calling him the Stranger and Chimere.
I'm gonna call him Chimere for the
call him
remainder.
Whatever you want, dude.
Because
I'm gonna call him Gorgeous.
Okay.
But I think we learned in this episode that he has this helmet, and we were wondering, like, how does he see out of this thing? It looks impossible to see out of, and apparently that's the point, is that you can't see, and that it works as a sensory deprivation helmet, similar to what Luke trained with and what we've seen younglings train with and what have you. But I wanted to start off by asking you, how do you think you'd fare have you ever been in a sensory deprivation thing?
I have. There was water involved, and it was actually really calming. You're very much just left there with your thoughts and the experience. And for myself, I do find myself always kind of rattling, and my brain's always going. So this was at the time I kind of needed it. I think I was in university, but it was a long time ago. But yeah, I remember just the feeling with the water, and just this whole experience. It was really interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I haven't done it since, but I remember feeling like, very at peace. It was part of I think a spa therapy thing package that I had signed up for.
Bro, if you want to go on a bro date, because I've seen it, right? I've seen people do that on TV. I've seen, I remember watching Stranger Things and just being kind of jealous of 11 in those moments where I was like, I kind of want to do that. That looks awesome. And I'm like, I don't like tight spaces that I feel like I absolutely cannot get out of. So those, if, being, even, I'm assuming that whatever you were in was quite big, so it wouldn't feel like you were constrained, right? So you're able to relax and what have you, and the water's not deep enough that you feel like you could drown or anything. So for me, I would, I have nightmares about being stuck in the cracks of a mountain wall and no one being around. I've had that before, and that's freaky, the idea of getting stuck in somewhere in a tight space. But I would love to, if you want to have a bro date and we go and just get into back to tanks, separate back to tanks, but back to tanks, I'd be down.
You know what? Not to pitch this as a Galaxy's Edge thing, but they should think about doing something like that. A little spa treatment.
A spa treatment part of, oh man. You know what?
That's what they appropriate that hotel for. It's just like a spa treatment.
That hotel should be 100%. That hotel should be a Galaxy's Edge spa.
This is why, we always go back and forth. We should be working for Lucasfilm and at Star Wars.
Dude.
This is an example of not doing that.
100% it is. I think that would be phenomenal. I'd pay a lot of money. Disney, I'd pay a lot of money.
Hey, nobody paid a lot of money for that goddamn hotel, so come on.
I would have, I promise. Just bring it back. Okay, before we get sniffed out by a little guy who stomps on our foot, And no, I'm not talking about one of our co-hosts. Let's get to this week's episode titled Teach/Corrupt, directed by Hanelle M. Culpepper. Episode 6 kicks off this time with Osha abruptly waking up in a cavern. She checks her injury, which has seemingly been healed. She immediately drinks some water and then notices a tiny little guy, a little creature chittering next to a bag of clothes. She opens up the bag and discovers one of May's knives and what were probably May's clothes as well, and she puts them on. She walks out towards the water to discover she's on an island, and some dramatic music plays, and we go right into our intro title. So interesting, this was, I think, maybe the only time I think in this show that they've gone into the intro title without any dialogue being spoken, I'm pretty sure. So let's stop there for a moment, and I want to kind of get into this island. It's listed as unknown planet when we come back to it in the next sequence, and I think there were some people that were like, it's Octo, and then some people were like, no, it's probably just Olega. Well, I was,
yeah.
But no, there were a lot of people on the internet
sure,
that still thought that, and
there's
I
still
think
people now that think that it is Octo. It's just sort of like
for sure
some sort of deception from the show. But Leslie Headland's actually, she did an interview with Maggie Lovett from Collider, and she's confirmed that it's not Octo, but there is obviously a reason why Chimere is on this planet, and it has everything to do with the cortosis, because that's where he's able to get this material. He's mining it here. There's a lot of people that thought it was Octo, and it made sense from the sense of like an Origin of the Force like storyline perspective, I guess. But it is interesting that this island, and I think some people already on Twitter have given it the name. I'm not sure if you saw it in their little description that they found online, and that's been kind of circulating on Twitter. There's mention of some Sith Lords that would inevitably come here and also utilize the cortosis from this planet. So that's also very insightful.
Yeah, the description that I've been seeing running around online is of a place called Baldemnik, an ocean planet adorned with rocky tropical islands in the Bakrofsen system of the Oral sector. Oral. I mean,
someone was getting oral in this one, let me tell you.
Located within the Outer Rim territories.
There you go.
Listen,
someone's Outer Rim.
This is a horny
oral.
episode, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Relax. It says with its extremely harsh climate, it discouraged most people from ever visiting the planet. I don't think we really saw anything in terms of harsh climate. However, that could be something that maybe has changed over the years or by the time this description was written. This is from Legends, so they can kind of change whatever they want. But
sure.
This description talks about pristine beaches and oceans and a lot of rich deposits of cortosis ore on this planet, which fell into the hands of Sith Lords Darth Tenebrou and Darth Plagueis. So I definitely think they are playing with that. I think to me it doesn't make sense to call this unknown planet. Unless, and the only thing I can think of is they don't want to confirm Baldemnik because they don't want to give any insight as to whether or not they're going to talk about Plagueis or Tenebrou or what have you.
That's what I was thinking.
And so that's got to be it, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense to call this an unknown planet. Star Wars is always kind of throwing in these new planets, and I think the other aspect to that as well is, I've been hearing that Leslie Headland has been kind of, I think somewhere quoted as saying like they will be wrapping up pretty much almost everything this season because of the fact that they aren't aware, and they still aren't aware. However, it seems like they think they're getting a season 2. So I'm wondering if the other side of it also has to do with the idea of like, can we even use Baldemnik? Is, especially with how these story groups work, in the sense that oftentimes, and with the High Republic books not really finished yet, like, are there potentially maybe some more reasons as to why they had to say unknown planet, simply because maybe they were not given the green light yet to go ahead with using that, even though it's what they're leaning towards.
Exactly. And it seems strange that what would be holding it up. There's a lack of consistency. We've seen names. If anything, it creates more mystery around what the hell this place is. That's about it. Right?
Yeah.
I wonder what the motive is as well.
I want to give some props to the cinematographer in this very first shot. I think that was, when we talk about poetic visual language in Star Wars, we talk about bookending and all the, it's one of our favorite things, or one of my favorite things. And I thought it was cool to see the exact shot and angle for Osha waking up abruptly, because it matches the exact shot and angle that we got from the first time we saw her. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of representing a rebirth in her character, right? We're seeing her kind of go through the beginning of a new journey, like we already saw in episode 1. So shout out to the choice to kind of use that shot, use that exact sort of same motif. I dug it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention that little guy, the little thing. StarWars.com has put out these guides to these episodes, and oftentimes they'll kind of fill in, very, very little, not really substantial, but very little lore things. And these are called skura, the little sort of like trunk-nosed, like duck anteater things. And Justin, they reminded me a lot of Tala Sirens. Again, like maybe that's purposeful for them to kind of continue that mystery of like,
Sure.
We're going to make them think it's Octo. But they're just like very tiny versions of the Tala Sirens.
Versions. Yeah. and they seem more, at least in the ones that we see in this episode, they're very family oriented, right? We see a little family.
If that means there's a male and a female, which means you can milk them. We get new milk at Galaxy's Edge, part of the spa treatment. I think that's what we do.
All right, that's a bit.
They milk them out their trunks, right onto your face.
But you're right, though. Like the fact that they kind of look like those creatures as well is such a like a deke out for it to kind of try to say, this could be Octu. You never know, right?
Maybe.
But I like that they're at least having fun with these things, and they're bringing new elements in.
And practical too, like Neil Scanlon getting to work and create this thing that maybe we will see a physical version, maybe at a museum. Maybe they do like they did for the Mandalorian at Star Wars Celebration. They have an Acolyte museum. Would be sick. Because I'd love to see one of these things and try and milk them. Okay, Osha walks out to see a ship in the distance, and across the water, kind of landed on a rock. And she looks over to see Kymir walking away from her. And then we cut to Sol attempting communication with the Jedi back on Coruscant, and he tells them that his whole team is dead. May walks throughout the ship, and she's reminded of when she took her test 16 years prior. She then walks towards Sol, and she's got her knife out, and she's ready to take him out.
Strike.
I guess she's gonna kill him. And Sol says, take the wheel. He calls for Osha, and he says, take the wheel. And then he heads down to reset the transceiver, and also I think just to have like sort of a moment alone. And in a moment of quiet, he slams his fist on the console in frustration. He looks around, he tears up, and he realizes just how quiet it is on the ship around him. Then Basil is on the hunt. He sniffs out a little charging dog. Yeah, he's a little freaky guy.
He's freaking out about charging this thing, right?
Dude, I mean,
I like the jump cuts the way they did it.
Yeah, he reminds me of like,
your dad trying to find a charger. Where, my God, where's the charger? I get it.
And then plugging it in the wrong way, even though it's like there's such it's very easy to figure it out. But no, he finally finds the charging dock. He charges up Pip, and Pip starts to communicate with him. So let's talk about this short sequence of events here. First, we see May slowly walking towards Sol to kill him, and then we see Sol sort of, in a way, diverting her to say, like, come take the wheel, steps away for a moment of quiet. What did you think of these sequences?
The only one that I really was drawn to was where Sol had this sort of quiet moment. I think it talks about what Kymir sort of accused Sol of. Like, what did you do with your darkness? His anger, his frustration. He had a quiet moment, and you could see like such anger in him, but then he goes through the process of resolve. So where is he pushing that? Where is he parking that in a way. So I think that to me was the most interesting part. The other interesting part too is, and you'll see it hand in hand, and maybe it's just more obvious now, but there's very much a distinction between the way Amandla Stenberg plays May and Osha that feels overtly apparent here. Like when you see her in Osha's outfit walking around, the way she's approaching Soul, and that happens in other scenes, it's like, you are not Osha.
Yeah.
Like, I know you're not
It
Osha.
almost makes you wonder, like, how Soul could have ever thought.
I wonder though
this
if
is all on purpose.
Well, I think he knew up until the point of when he, will inevitably catch her. But I think even in the way he was talking to her, and we'll get to other scenes, it feels more like he's investigating her to see how she's going to react.
Yeah, there's a very specific moment that I think you and I might agree on. But
yeah.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it
for sure. But anyways, the way she's skulking through the ship, it's just like she's obviously not Osha, right? And when you see Osha, obviously, in the way she's interacting with Chimera on the island, it just, there's such an appearance. But yeah, Basil, like, he got a lot of time in this episode, right?
Maybe a little too much time.
I feel like a little too much, and like at the end of the day, I don't know how much he really helped too. I he's just
kind of
he stomped on a foot, and he had some freaky moments, and
we'll talk. Well, don't worry, he'll come back. We'll talk about him again.
That's true.
I think I want to shout out Michael Abels. I think I dug the music a lot in this episode, and I'm digging the music in this series. I don't think there's yet anything that is too overtly sort of
Kylo's theme is the most,
out.
and that's because it's
For
Kylo's
sure.
theme.
But I will
like
say
moments, I totally agree.
And the string work, I really dug the string work. I think the moment of quiet, just in the scene that we talked about earlier, of Osha walking out onto the island and just looking over to her right, there's this like really cool string thing.
Yes,
it gave me
she's walking out to see the vastness of where she is.
It gave me like House of the Dragon vibes, right?
Yes.
And obviously, it's I'm deep into House of the Dragon right now. But I also want to shout out JJ's performance here. I just really the way he looks around and sees how empty the ship is, like he's, like you said, like he's taking in what just happened, and especially you brought up what Chimera said to him, but I think he's also recognizing in that moment that the secrets that he's holding on to are that he's going deeper and deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole, and it's one of those things where he held those secrets for so long, then he probably found a way, like you said, to bury them, however he finds a way to do that. But now he's seeing the results of those sort of coming to light again, and him having to reconcile with them. And I don't know. I think it's cool how he's sort of haunted by how quiet it is around him. And there's a brief acting choice moment. I think it's probably something that JJ chose to do, but he like literally he looks around, like he looks to the left and then a little bit further to see like where is everyone. And it sort of just is him processing all of that loss and sort of grieving that. And I thought that was great, especially coming from a character who is a Jedi, right? And we often talk about the fact that, like, he seems very Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon was very much against some of those dogmatic practices of the Jedi, really not standing for relationships or attachments. And you sort of see Soul sort of like stepping into that humanity, and it's fantastic. It was really, really good.
Yeah, I think it definitely highlights how Soul is different from even what we think and we know about the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And given the fact that we are 100 years removed from the prequels, or the Skywalker saga, if you will, that's also like, to have that sense of awareness that Soul seems to have, that's really what's starting here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about the rise of the dark side, but maybe we're also looking at the rise of the gray. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? In the aspect of just understanding Jedi challenging the order of the Jedi Council and the order of power, if you will.
Yeah, and I was reading up and doing a little bit of studying on Vernestra, who also gets a lot more time this episode. And one of the things that I found interesting, and while I haven't read the High Republic books, based on some of the descriptions of her, it really does sound like Vernestra, at one point, and throughout maybe the books, very much was in a similar sense, kind of like Soul, kind of like Qui-Gon, where she would definitely challenge certain things. But here we see her in this episode and in this series, and she's very different than the descriptions that I read of her. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see what they do with their character. One last thing I want to mention just before we continue, it still drives me a bit wild that they expect us to believe that May's hair is covering up her tattoo that much. I think the tattoo and its symbolism isn't worth the suspension of disbelief in terms of really believing that Soul doesn't think it's her, or that she actively thinks that she is hiding. And I just think that, like, I get that.
Did you see it?
I did, yeah, 100%. And there's also a sequence where, coming up where, granted, Soul's not in the room, but her hair's kind of brushed to the side and you do see it. And I just think it's one of those things where it's like, early on, I get it. It's a great way to differentiate for your audience who is who. I just don't think it's worth it. I think if their decision, if they had the foresight to know that they were going to do a switcheroo with these twins at one point, I just don't think you do the tattoo. Find a less permanent way to have done something like that. Like maybe something that one of them wears that the other one never does or something, and then that's how they manage to do this.
It's weird. That's
I don't
of
know.
all the things that bothered me about this episode, that's the least of it. I never even thought of it.
No, for sure.
I know.
Yeah.
I definitely I understand where you're coming from.
It just seems
sure.
silly. It just seems like a silly
it does
thing.
seem like a silly choice.
Yeah.
It does. But I will say I did watch it twice, and anytime she was in a scene with someone else, I tried to see if you could see it, and they did a good job of like really using the bangs. Like you'd have to really know that it's there to look at it. But
yes,
to Soul, I don't know. Like I guess
I don't know. It just seems like there's an easier way to not have to have that problem.
But I don't even understand this whole plan to begin with, because like we've been hinting at, or like we were talking about before, is that it seems like Soul knows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's not, like, even in the next scene when he goes to hug her. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It feels like it was sort of forced. Right, and I think it was purposeful.
We'll get to it. Back with Osha. That's their celebrity name.
Back with
Osha.
Osha
or Kaisha. I don't know. We'll workshop it. Back with Osha and Kymir, we see her follow him from a distance to a placid pool. As he begins to untie a belted knot from around his waist, she straightens up for a better look. He begins to undress, revealing a prominent scar on his well-toned back. Did you just
take this from the visual description?
Yes, I did. 100%. Let me begin. He begins to undress, revealing a prominent scar on his well-toned back. Dropping his billowy-legged Takama pants, he steps forward with the sunlight accentuating his top muscles. Osha spots his lightsaber and picks it up, staring at it intently. This is my own writing now. He turns around and compliments her stance and begins to give her some tips. She threatens him and asks if he can put on he asks if he can put on his clothes. He explains how he's able to read her mind and how her anger betrays her thoughts. Osha asks if he killed Soul or May, and he finds it interesting that she asks about Soul before her own sister, and he comments on how special the relationship is between a master and a pupil. So yes, I did use the audio descriptions for part of that description.
You did, yeah.
Because it just gets really horny, and I saw that it was being passed around online, and I know you tweeted something out about it as well. And no, it's just, yeah, I've never thought to turn on the audio descriptions, and I'll be honest with you, I know I'm kind of joking around. It actually does help when
I
writing
watched
these
it the second time I watched it with it on.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to hear what else was described. And there are some things where, the audio description refers to the stranger as Kymir, says the Sith in one instance, references him as a Sith.
It's also how I knew that, like, the blade that she picks up was May's blade in particular. Yeah. And, who knows, like, could that have been from an armory that he gives to different people or whatever? I don't know. So the fact that it's like that.
It seems like there's no other people, though.
In particular. No, I know. I'm just saying, like, it was helpful to know, like, that absolutely is May's blade as opposed to a blade.
But that's another topic, that the fact that there's no one else. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that yeah, the audio description was wild in this scene.
Wild.
It
Who
gets
wrote
hot.
that? Who wrote that? I think I guess what I kind of want to dive into is, they had to find a way to get Chimere naked, which was just interesting. And then, what did you think of this exchange between the two of them?
Well, yeah, the whole naked thing it's a bit much. Like it just sort of feels out of place, like for the show. Like
It looked like Osha was like looking up and down,
of course,
quite a few
but like
times.
I think at the same time I think the symbolism behind it is a sense of vulnerability.
Sure.
He's
saying like, I'm completely vulnerable here. You even have my weapon. Pick it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a sense of vulnerability in that moment, and I think as we see the rest of these interactions unfold, that vulnerability remains in place. And I think he did this. I don't think this is something that just happened. This is all happening on a plan that he is orchestrating,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is how he is, diminishing her wall, brick by brick. Just to kind of get her to open up and maybe understand a little bit more. I think he's willing to share. I think he recognizes, even in just this opening sort of discussion, but from mainly this entire episode, it feels like he realizes hiding himself might have not necessarily worked to his advantage to earning the trust of his pupil. And now that this has started to kind of unfold in the way, and the events of episode 5 has happened, he's now re-examining that and saying, I'm going to do it different this time with Osha, and she's seen me. I need to work with that. So I think it's just a different of approach. So this whole interaction feels a little sexy. I think it definitely insinuates some Ben Solo and Rey vibes, if you will. In that they go from enemies to sort of loosely, I guess, lovers. And so like I don't know, I'm hoping they don't necessarily go that hard with the idea, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Because you know what, like, good on Manny Jacinto, because he's a fucking standout in this episode.
Yeah.
Man. Like his acting is just like he is like surpassed everyone.
Yeah.
To me it's him and Lee Jung Jae, and I honestly think that like the dude has worked on his figure. So sure, you know what?
Show it off.
Like show it off. Do your thing, right? And I think there's intentionality though with the way this was written. So it's weird. I have like I like it, but then I also feel like it might have been too much to just do this whole like naked scene. It seems, overly sexualized and stuff like that. Not to say that I'm not uncomfortable with it. It just feels like, again, like you won't show people getting their heads cut off, but you'll make this like very, insinuatingly sexual, moment. I don't know. I just feel like where are we going here? What part are we standing?
I think there's another element to it too, though, in terms of I think oftentimes Star Wars talks about the being seduced by the dark side, and I think there's an element
there you
to
go.
that
That's
they're
really
maybe
good.
playing
Okay.
with. In the concept of yes.
All right, now I love the idea
sexually
there you
as
go.
well as So I think that might be
love
where
it.
they're going with it.
That's perfect.
But
you just justified that
Hey.
now. So I'm like, you know what? You take the fact that he's being vulnerable with her, and now he's seducing her.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I think that works. That works. I'm down.
I also thought it was really kind of intriguing how he did he brought up the fact that she brought up Soul before she brought up May.
She's calling it. He's calling her out.
Right. And also the idea that I think because he mentions that final line, between the master and the pupil, and obviously that's what he wants, but I think it's interesting because that makes
Isn't it
sense.
a Padawan?
It makes sense. What's that?
Isn't it usually referred to as a Padawan?
He says pupil in this sequence, but
I guess it's because it's what he wants.
right, and also I think Padawan is very much Jedi speak.
Jedi,
right?
Yeah.
But I think he, she grew up. She has more years with Soul than she does with May, right? And so I think it makes perfect sense that she would see Soul as, even though she's been away from him for so long, I feel like she maybe sees him as more family at this point than May. But
she said that in the last episode, right? Like she said, like they were more my family than you were.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The people that she killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
She didn't kill.
Back on the ship in orbit of Kofar, we see May cycling through a control sequence. Sol enters and grabs May, saying, "You saved us, Osha." He apologizes and says it's time to make things right and to face the High Council, to tell them everything. May responds with everything, and the holo transmission lights up again, interrupting them. But before Sol can respond, the power goes out on the ship. Sol turns and looks at May and asks her to take a look. She's caught off guard. She shifts her eyes, and then she tells him to give her a couple minutes. Now, we will go back to talking about this a little bit later on, but this is where I kind of felt like it might be okay for the sake of our conversation to rearrange the episode a little bit. So going forward, we're gonna kind of dive into Vernestra's investigation. Then we're gonna come back to Sol and May, and then Chimere and Osha. So meanwhile, on Coruscant, we see Master Vernestra in the middle of a holo call with Senator Chewant, and the two discuss a senator named Rayencourt, who Vernestra says has never been a friend to the Jedi. Senator Chewant explains how his external review of the Order seems like an ambitious grasp for power, but not to be alarmed because the Jedi have always been transparent with the Senate. She ends the transmission as she's interrupted by Mog, who I thought she just said Mark, like in an accent, but it's Mog. And Mog explains that they've received a distress call from Master Sol, who's informed them that his entire team was killed. She asks him to prepare a rescue team to depart for Kofar immediately. He asks her how she knows where he is, and she's like, "'Cause I sent him there, bitch." So I wanted to stop here and discuss Senator Chewant and this discussion of Senator Rayencourt. What do you think this is about? Like, what are they sort of hinting at here? Because obviously this was purposeful.
I didn't have time to do any sort of research and pull anything up, but yeah. I thought maybe you might have. But
well, I tried to look up Rayencourt. There's really I thought maybe that book readers would know if he was mentioned in the High Republic books. Well, that's I've literally, the moment, because in our group chat I messaged to see if Darcy was home yet, and he's still in Europe. But I didn't find anything about him, but I did find something interesting about Chewant. But before I get to that, I wanted to ask you, what do you think this means for Vernestra and this senator kind of coming in wanting to sort of do a deep dive inspection of the Jedi Order?
I think it might mean that, like, obviously it's freaking her out because there's probably so much that she's had to like sweep under the table, and keep out of knowing eyes. So she's been hiding it, and I think even just the events that follow this are an example of how she's found herself in situations where she's had to do a bit of a cover up, and maybe like it seems like she's kind of unraveling, and this might have been like the beginning of that, where she's starting to realize that like maybe there's a not a disdain but an awareness, if you will, of maybe what are the Jedi actually doing, right? These outer rim, these other systems are starting to sort of be like, hold on a second, do they have too much power? Maybe they have too much power. Maybe they don't need to be like this authoritarian in this in this era, if you will. Yeah, it's definitely a rough time for Vernestra, like you're saying, and I think having Senator Rayencourt digging into what's going on is going to be interesting. I don't think they'll necessarily follow that up, but I think it's just sort of it's there to sort of light a fire under Vernestra to sort of say like, we really, really need to tighten up. Well, that could be the season 2, right? Like that sort of that idea that the Senate's coming after the Jedi, and secrets need to be explained, and maybe they are explained, and then we see the fallout of these secrets being explained, and the sense of that's interesting because like the Senate, very much the Jedi and the Senate by the time of the prequel trilogy, like when he says they've always been transparent with the Senate, it's just funny because that's literally one of the biggest reasons that Palpatine was really able to kind of have so much influence, right, is because they were able to like sort of marry the very separate religious side and the politics side, and they've kind of now come together by the prequel trilogy. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that is sort of pushing for us to understand a little bit more deeply the story between how the Jedi and the Senate sort of merge together. I did want to mention
the full name of Senator Chewant. The full name for Senator Chewant is I said what you want. Which is funny because he's.
I said what you want.
I said what you want. I said what you want. He's an Abed. I'm making sure I'm pronouncing that right. An Abednego. And their species in all of Star Wars are always named after references to the Beastie Boys. So apparently there's a character named Roodown, which is a reference to Root Down. There's a character named Brass Monkey, which is Brass Monkey. There's a character named So What You Want, and which is so what you want. And then there's a character named Audi Mova, which is apparently body moving. And then in Chuck Wendig's Aftermath, Empire's End, there's Al's Utek, which apparently is supposed to be Paul's Boutique or Al's Utique. And then in The Last Jedi, Joseph Gordon-Levitt voiced a character named Slow and Low, which is Slow and Low from the album License to Ill. And then in The Acolyte, we have I Said What You Want, which, again, is another reference to what you want. So I love that this is something that, Pablo Hidalgo was writing in the visual dictionary for one of these Star Wars movies and was like, you know what? They're all going to be Beastie Boys. It's just, I don't know. I thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a really cool. That's a cool Easter egg in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like where you could mask and disguise the name. So yeah, I was like, yeah, that's. When you said it, I'm like, isn't that a song from the Beastie Boys? That's so crazy.
Yeah, so
that's crazy.
Wanted to throw that in there. I haven't seen too many people talking about I Said What, but apparently that's his name. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going here. Vernestra arrives at the spaceport dressed in field mission robes, and Mog questions her, mentioning that she gets nauseous whenever she travels through hyperspace, and she corrects him by saying she doesn't get sick, she just finds it unsettling. She demands that she joins him in handling it personally. They arrive on Kofar, and while they're initially led to believe by those two big alien twin dudes that the Jedi died after disturbing a nest of Umber moths, they continue into the forest to discover the bodies of the Jedi killed by Chimere. Mog recognizes that both Osha and May are missing, and he says he sees an explosion and then a battle. An Umber moth swoops in, but don't worry, Vernestra senses it and uses her saber blade, whipping it backwards to slay the bug. Mog questions if it could have been Sol, and after Vernestra authoritatively tells him that that's quite the accusation, he questions who else could possess the power to slay such a strong group, and Vernestra says quietly, something to tip the scales. So let's dig into this. Do you think Vernestra actually knows who is responsible here? Is she remembering someone? Is she formulating a plan in this moment? What do you think she means by something to tip the scales?
I think she's sensing something.
Okay.
And I think she's seeing all the signs of it. And I think what Senator Say What You Want was referring to is kind of like part of that, right? And I think it's this idea of like how in the prequels there was such a cloud they can't see things, and I think she can't fully see what's happening, but she knows these pieces are coming, and things are falling into place that are going to oppose her and the Jedi. Yeah, and I think she also knows that there's probably things that she needs to button up on, and which is why she's actively, insinuating she needs to go seek out what happened here. So yeah, it's again, I think we're starting to see her sort of unravel, and I think the mystery around her is actually going to be, I'm hoping, is revealed by the end of this season.
Totally.
You were saying off the top that Leslie Headland has said that mostly everything in this season is going to get wrapped up, and I'm
Apparently.
I thought a lot of it was going to be left on the table for season 2, and that kind of makes me worried. I'm like, we're 2 episodes left. It's like you're gonna need to rush some stuff then, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. And to be clear, I believe what was said was that a lot of the emotional sort of arcs will be wrapped up is kind of what was said.
What does
So
that mean?
so right, exactly. So does that, we'll obviously we'll find out. But I think the idea of Vernestra being unsettled by hyperspace travel, again, when I was sort of doing a bit of research on her, apparently it has to do with a tragedy that I won't necessarily spoil, and I it was sort of spoiled for me when I was reading about it, but then I kind of stopped myself from going too far into it because I didn't want to spoil it.
No, you read it. You spoiled it. You spoiled it.
In case they ever
like,
do more of these stories in the High Republic, because I think that those books, from what I've been told, are really, really good. But I believe her being unsettled by hyperspace travel. There was some tragedy, something that happened in relation to hyperspace travel that is causing her to be unsettled. So I think that was a moment for like High Republic book readers to kind of do the Leo meme and point at the screen and be, oh yeah, okay, I kind of popping off in that moment. But I do wonder if maybe she's aware of some kind of history with Chimere, right? And I think the other thing that confuses me, and again, I would need to consult with a book reader, but I guess that the part that sort of confuses me about it is there a large jump in time or a large gap in time for her character? Because from what I'm aware of, she is pretty integral in the High Republic book series, and so it's like one of those things where it's like, was there some gap in time that wasn't ever explored that they can then say, okay, that's where we're going to insert this little backstory in here for them to have had a relationship? Because to me, I feel like that would be something that book readers would point out immediately. Like they would absolutely catch if they know this character that well. So I guess what I'm saying is I would need to read the books to fully understand, but I don't know. Do you think that that's maybe what they're going for? That maybe she's sort of worried about something from her past coming back?
Yeah, look, I think she's worried about something from her past 100% coming back. And
yeah.
I was going to save this for the end, but I'll just kind of hint at it now, I guess. But I do think that there is a history between Vernestra and Chimere. I think, I saw it, and I know the internet has validated this, and well, the internet being Twitter. But, the scar on Chimere's back, it looks like a lightsaber web. And I'm wondering if something happened there, and if there's a connection through that, and that we kept thinking about maybe Soul having a relationship with Chimere that he has completely forgotten, but he later validates that the first time he met him was in Olega in episode 2. So I'm wondering if his history with the Jedi is actually through Vernestra, and he's aware of who Soul is.
Interesting.
He was the Padawan that. It's really hard to tell the age of all. Like I imagine, Soul's obviously older than May and Chimere. Well, obviously older than May,
right?
But older than Chimere as well, because I feel like Chimere and May and Osha are all sort of in the same age bracket. So,
okay.
Was he the apprentice before him? That was with Master Vernestra, or maybe there is something there, and they never really cross paths, but that's why he knows who Soul is outside of just knowing May's story and so on and so forth. So but yeah, to go back to the whole thing, I do think that there is a history there that is yet to be explored, and I think as we see Master Vernestra kind of unravel in this, is that it's sort of revealing that she has her own secrets as much as Soul, and it seems like other Jedis have kept secrets.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, to be fair, Anakin had an entire Padawan that we didn't know about at all, and was never brought up in any Star Wars story until we got the animated Clone Wars. So to be fair, if there is some little
so you're
gap
justifying
in time,
it, I'm totally fine with it.
It's very
I'm
possible.
fine with it because again, I have no emotional connection to the books. Like you said, I've heard nothing but great things in terms of building out the era and so on and so forth. So I love that it's done that. So, but this could be a different version of that character. Some stuff has probably happened that hasn't been seen, that hasn't been tapped in. I can't believe that those books tell all 100 years
right.
of her life. So something could have happened that would justify and explain, the relationship she might have with Chimere. Maybe she went down a different path. Maybe she was confused or something. And maybe this is giving this character another, set of legs of outside of what everyone thinks they know about her. So yeah, I'm not like against the idea of trying to bring something new and fresh, just as you mentioned, like how they decided to introduce a Padawan that Anakin had that was never mentioned.
I will say one thing that I don't think will be justified is how they decided to use that light whip. I just think I got excited for like half a second, and then it's just like
there's gonna be
they killed
more.
a bug, and that was it. No, Justin, I promise you there won't be, okay? We'll call it now. There won't be any more light whip this season. No more light whip. And, those book readers who have been waiting forever to see, that was the budget. They can't afford more Wookiee bodies. They can't afford, it's just, there's all these stories going around about the budget, even though it's massive for this show. It wasn't even so much that that's how it was done. It just felt like that moment should have had a little more weight to it. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like, coming off, like, seeing it in the trailer, it just sort of was
remember something.
Yeah.
Remember, she's not striking it unless she absolutely needs to, right?
Sure.
She's not going to use it. So we have to take that into account. The only thing that was a real threat was, Chimere and as the stranger, right?
Yeah.
So causing them to whip out their sabers, right? Unless you're Yord and you just use it like a cop and it's like, where's the answers? I need the answers. Come on, I got my lightsaber out. But I don't. Like, I think we'll get more.
Yeah.
I hope we get more.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like, I think if that's all we're getting, then I'll revisit this and say, yeah, that was a bad decision. But as maybe a tease to see more later, because I do think that this is really going to come down to Vernestra, May, Osha, and Chimere, right? Like, it's going to be the five of them.
Okay.
And and I think Sol and Vernestra are going to have it out.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
All right.
I think there's going to be some confrontation there.
Okay. Well, let's keep going here. May enters the engine room and looks around cluelessly. She discovers Pip's head, and Basil has found her. And he does like a weird little karate dance, and then he angrily grabs her leg and then stomps on her foot and then runs back inside his hole. An engine valve shoots grease into May's eye, and she freaks out. And then she resets Pip to factory settings. She reattaches his head to a spare body, and then asks him to run a check on the power system. Basil scurries back through the floor gates, and we see Sol call for Osha. May walks towards him, and he sits there and is looking super upset and just asks how could he not sense that villain's true intentions when they first encountered him on Olega. She says, when you really want something, it clouds your mind, and you see what you want to see. He compliments Osha, saying he noticed the way she takes care of her pip droid and loves him, even though he's just a machine. May responds, saying she's always been like that, and that she had to lose a lot of herself to become a Jedi, even if she didn't know it at the time. Sol apologizes and says he's sorry that she felt that way. She asks him once again to tell her everything that happened that night on Brendok. And then the power comes back on, and the two say nothing. She then makes a beeline for the communications console. She attempts to use it, but Sol uses a stun blast and knocks her unconscious. He says, "Oh, May." And he hears a Jedi informing him that a rescue team is on the way and to leave his transponder on. He shuts it off immediately, and then immediately leaves Kofar's atmosphere, making the jump to light speed. So, Justin, what did you think of Basil's attempt at heroism, and when do you think Sol clocked that it was Osha?
Yeah, the Basil thing was silly. I'm just gonna say it. It was silly. It was unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think I would have rather none of the stuff that we saw of him.
He accomplished really nothing.
He got Pip back up, but then
okay.
The other thing too is that now he's reset.
But I get that Yord was like the only one that could communicate with this creature, with Basil. But at the same time, like, why not even attempt to run back to Sol the moment you realize what's going on? Like, it just felt so silly
my
to
other
me.
theory with that is that, like, you see how he moves out of the way and Basil's there.
Yeah.
I think Basil told him or communicated to him, and I think he knew though. I think he knew, and he realized that that it was her while they were having this conversation.
Soul, you mean?
Soul.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Soul realized that this wasn't Osha.
Hmm.
And I think it has a lot to do with her responses.
Sure.
Right. Like, again, we as an audience member can tell that it's May.
Yeah.
Right. Like, Osha just has such her feelings are in everything she's kind of says, and she said, how she delivers it. Whereas May's very cold, and she feels very cold in this scene, and it's because she's angry.
Yeah.
She's she's talking about it from a different perspective. I think he recognized that, and he saw that, and saw Basil. Basil said, she ain't who she is, or whatever. She's communicated in some way, and he's like, I'm going, right.
Sure. I just wish we'd seen that maybe so we could justify.
Maybe I know.
So
maybe
much
I'm
Basil.
justifying it.
Yeah.
You're right. Like he could have probably already known by the time Basil got to him. Do you know what I mean? Basil would be like, she's not, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I know. I'm going to take care of this. Don't worry. Right?
I was watching the cameras. Great karate dance, little guy. I think. I think you're partially right. I think yes. I think the conversation that they have where he mentions how much Osha takes care of Pip was him sort of securing that he knows. But I think what initially kicks it off to him is not the tattoo on this girl's forehead, but is when
you can't see it though. In that scene,
sure,
you can't
okay,
see it.
Whatever. He's a very powerful Jedi. You should be able to see these things. Anyways, I think it's when the power goes out. I think the power goes out, and I'm almost wondering if he caused the power to go out. But when the power goes out, May does nothing. Right? May does nothing. Where Osha, who is always doing the right thing, is always wanting to help. She, especially being a mechanic, would jump in that moment to say, don't worry, I got it all. I'll get the power back on. Whereas May just sort of sits there, and it takes Soul to say, are you going to, do something about the power for her to actually then do it? So I think that's the moment that tipped him off. And then I think you're right. I think throughout that conversation that he has with her, and throughout this episode, obviously, he's sort of piecing together what's going on. And
100%.
Yeah.
100%. He recognizes that it's there, and maybe he did see the tattoo and we just don't know.
Maybe
that'd be funny if in next week's episode she's like, how did you know it was me? And he just reveals the bangs.
Yeah,
you can't hide this.
Yeah, please write that in.
Nate would be like, vindicated.
Yeah, he's
vindicated.
He's like, you think I wouldn't know if Nate figured it out? And then he looks at the camera and gives a wink. Bro, let's make it happen. All right, let's get back to Kymir and Osha for a moment. Osha follows Kymir along the beach, and he informs her that he was a Jedi, not just a long time ago, a really long time ago. She tells him that Soul has found her before and that he's very strong in the Force. Kymir reminds her that that's not his strength, it's hers. He recommends that she start swimming to reach her ship by sundown, or to reach his ship by sundown. He walks away asking if she's hungry. They enter the cave, and Kymir mentions that the Jedi share their teachings on how to retain the Force, but there's another way. That below the surface of consciousness, there are powerful emotions like anger, fear, loss, and desire. Osha says that that's the path to the dark side, but Kymir calls out semantics. She frustratingly calls out that he killed Yord and Jeki, and he asks her why she chooses to love people who can only go so far. Osha walks out, clutching his lightsaber, and Kymir pulls it towards his chest, telling her to turn it on. He tells her that her anger and pain is who she is, that the Jedi saw it, and that's why they threw her away. He asks her why she isn't a Jedi, and she yells out, "Because I failed." She ignites the saber and presses it up against his neck. He says he understands and that he lost everything, but when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free. Osha backs off and lowers her saber. So let's dissect this a bit. Justin, what did you think of the fact that Kymir was once a Jedi, and why do you think Osha believes she failed?
The first part about Kymir being a Jedi once, and the fact that he says it was a really long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
How old's this guy?
Right.
Could he be older than Soul?
Does having Force healing allow you to live a very long time, longer than Vernestra.
Oh, maybe.
You know what I'm saying?
Like that's a rich one.
Yeah.
If we're going down that route, I don't know if he can force heal. Was he force healing? I guess
so this is the thing. This is the debate.
Last week's episode?
Was he just turning the body, like, was he just turning Osha over, or was he healing her? The fact that she checks on her scar this time around, and yes, there's a blood mark on the clothes, but I don't think they would have shown her, like, checking it if she didn't heal. I don't know. I think the idea is, like, I mean, here's the thing. One could argue that Palpatine couldn't force heal, and he was the most powerful Sith ever. But I also think the other side of the argument is that this show especially is showing us that everyone connects with the Force in different ways. So it would make sense that, some people could achieve certain things in the Force despite how powerful or not powerful they were. And I think, to me, I think it would be interesting, and I think it would upset a lot of people if Chimere turned out to be Plagueis himself. But that's just a something that we thought initially, and then we're kind of going against it. But this whole idea of him saying a really long time ago, I don't know. It just gives me the impression that he's very old.
Yeah, I definitely forgot. I forgot about that. But yeah, like that when I had heard that the second time, I was like, is he implying that he's older?
Mm-hmm.
Which could align with having a past with Vernestra, right? Like definitely having a past with her. So I think there is something there that will be explored. Hopefully, will be explored.
Yeah.
I don't know the whole thing with her failing. It's hard to say. I think we need to know more about that situation. I'm sure you have a theory, but like,
yeah.
At the same time, it's like, I don't know. I can't see her killing someone.
No.
I could see her emotions influencing a decision, but I just don't know what that would be. And then that's kind of like, that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
It's a big no-no. You're out.
No, I think that's it. I think, because look at this, right? Like the fact that, like, he in this episode, he calls out, her the fact that she loves, she cares, she has fears, she has desires, right? And she very much does feel that way. And it's just interesting to sort of see how so much of sort of her and herself, how it sort of pushed her to go away from her past and from her coven. And then at the same time, it also is kind of what makes her think that she's failed with the Jedi. Right.
Well, we talked about this.
Yeah.
We talked about this as well. Like her desire to want to go and seek the world and see everything outside of the coven and leave her family.
Yeah.
That's sort of selfish, which is a dark side trait.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And it's because of this idea of, adventure and wanting to have something for herself.
Right.
Right. And this idea, wanting more, right. Outside of what the coven is saying.
Sure.
Is what she should want. Right. She wants to make her own decision. And I think, again, that kind of feeds into this whole idea of maybe she's the better acolyte. You know what I mean? Maybe there is more there to kind of break down and rebuild that would influence the dark side, or would be influenced by the dark side.
And I think that we also kind of talked a little bit last week about the idea that Chimere, saw himself in May, but now really sees himself in Osha. And the idea that he says that they tossed you aside, right? They threw you away.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened to him. He was thrown away.
Sure,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think he mentions that later in the episode. There is a line that he says, once you've lost everything, that's when you're truly free. And this line, to me, lines up with a lot of the ideology of the Knights of Ren, who ask new recruits to kill a member of their family to be initiated in, right? We saw that with Ben having to kill Han as part of sort of his ability to free himself, to leave that attachment behind, which is interesting because, like, again, the whole idea is like going against what the Jedi are kind of, sort of focusing on. But this, I guess, is something that, like, I'm wondering if maybe Chimere did something and then blames the Jedi for what happened, but then at the same time he's recognizing and reconciling with that's how he gained his freedom in the end, is that he just had nothing but himself to live for, and now maybe that's, in a way, that's what gave him his freedom. But then he's also like, that's not good enough. I need a pupil. I don't know. I just think I keep going back to the idea that Kymir will ask now Osha to kill May before the end of this season, at least. I think in the last episode we're gonna see that moment where she's gonna have to then make a choice, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens.
Well, that's a big theory.
It's a big theory.
Jeez.
You like that?
Yeah, it's juicy. That's seems far too early in the episode. I don't know, like the whole idea too of like you're touching on the fact that like if this is a Ren inspired story,
yeah,
there's a lot of intrigue here. I wonder if we'll inevitably see Kymir's Dark Master and who he is.
Or she,
because I think, or she, my apologies, yeah, or who they are,
sure.
Because like there's a lot of intrigue around, like this episode was, I enjoyed for these parts, right, because of the sort of unraveling and the way that he's, again, as I was mentioning before, he's making himself very vulnerable after we saw such an intense, calculated, and just a great fighter with the saber. Like she could be dead, right? He could not want to deal with her, but he is unraveling her through these conversations, and it's really, really interesting. And I would like to learn more about Kymir and where he comes from and where he goes. And I'm hoping he doesn't die at the end of this.
That's
like,
also
Manny
a big
Jacinto,
thing that people are I know. He's so good.
Manny Jacinto is so freaking good.
Yeah, I want to see more of him
show,
in Star Wars,
man.
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I want to see more of him in this role, and I want to see the next chapter. It'd be great if everyone around him, maybe all the Jedi, are gone. Like maybe we do see the end of Vernestra, right? Like, and she's gone too, right? But
I also do think that we talked about this before, but May and Osha being a dyad in the Force, I think is very possible. And I also have a theory and a thought that maybe they're the first ever dyad recognized on the timeline, that a dyad wasn't discovered until them, because someone posted on Twitter a scene from The Rise of Skywalker and the sequence with Palpatine sort of absorbing the power, and he literally says, quote, "A dyad in the Force, a power like life itself, unseen for generations, and now," and this is exactly what he says, "the power of two restores the one true emperor." So, I mean, this could be coincidental. They could have maybe taken inspiration from that exact line for the power of one, power of two, power of many chant that the witches do. But, I remember seeing so many people thinking that was so cheesy, that chant that they did. And I never did, and I'm happy that I didn't, because I think if that is the connecting tissue, if that does go all the way to Palpy, all the way back, that's really smart, and I think it's really cool.
That's really smart. Yeah. It's justifying a lot of the shit that happened in that movie.
Yeah.
Again, and like even just the way Filoni's playing with cloning, as we've talked about numerous times.
Yeah.
Throughout all of the other shows, it's giving more depth to the events that we've seen in theaters in the Skywalker saga, and it's making that interesting. It's funny that we know where we're going. It's now the interest of how did we get there, right? And that's awesome. So if that's where they're going, and even just this idea too of the Knight of Ren, right? Like that's a very sequel trilogy, right? And it's been obviously explored in comics and stuff like that, but to potentially get like an origin of the Ren out of this is pretty cool.
Cool idea.
It's pretty dope.
Yeah. Later, inside the cave, Osha watches Kymir repairing his helmet. She asks him what he wants, and he says the power of two. She asks about his scar and tells her it was someone who threw him away. She questions if it was his Jedi master. Her gaze turns towards his helmet, and he discusses the properties of cortosis and how the helmet is also used as a sensory deprivation headpiece, like they used to use when they were younglings. He tells her she should try it on. She says she doesn't trust him, and he says she shouldn't, but she should learn to trust herself. She looks over and contemplates trying it on. Then, back with Soul, May wakes up to slowly discover she's being held by binders on a recovery table. Soul, sitting there, watching her, tells her he has no intention of harming her. She asks him to let her go, and he says he will. But he says they have a lot to do. They need to find her master. They need to save Osha. But first, they need to talk. He says he's had 16 years to think about what he'd say to her if he ever got the opportunity. He says, "You're going to listen." And then we cut to black. Let's get to some predictions, and I'm just going to kind of read off the last portion of the episode, and then we'll kind of get to our final segment here for what you foresee happening next. Back in the cave, Chimere's helmet remains on the work table, and Osha sits in front of it. She traces her fingers over the cortosis in the helmet and then looks up to see a vein of the substance running up a channel in the rock wall in front of her. She looks back at the helmet, takes hold of it, lifts it up, and then slides it over her head slowly. We see from her point of view, we see the view of the small amount of light coming through the two eye slits, and then we see it go dark, and the episode ends with her breathing. So May is strapped to a table, and Osha is now literally wearing the helmet of Chimere, the stranger. Where do we go next? What do you foresee happening next?
Well, logistically, I foresee that the next episode is the flashback episode, and not only because it's the penultimate, but I think that's obviously going to set up a lot of answers. I think we'll get a bit of a WandaVision moment with episode 7 where it explains a lot that is still left on the table. I at least hope.
Yeah.
And put my hands up. I hope.
Yeah.
Power of 2, please. Bring me a all round full setup for the finale. And I think it's a really good point, like where they're leaving both of these characters. Like you mentioned, like May is strapped to a table. She ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
And it looks like Osha's about to lose herself in this sleep deprivation and embracing the Force. And I think almost as a dyad or like parallel, they're going to experience the events of that evening yet again. We're going to see it from probably May's perspective, and maybe that's sort of how Osha sees it, right? Like maybe she starts to see it that way, and maybe the episode is very, May's perspective, because the last flashback episode we got in episode 3 was definitely, we could say, from Osha's perspective. So yeah, I think that's what is inevitably gonna happen. But throughout this episode, I've kind of dropped little hints and predictions of what I'd like to see, what I think that they're hinting at, with the Knights of Ren and seeing this idea of like Chimere and Vernestra having a pass, and Soul having a very cathartic experience with May and kind of like letting off of his shoulders what happened, and we get to kind of like, we understand now how the events happened, and that might lead him into a confrontation with Vernestra and him understanding what she did to Chimere, right? And maybe how she's wrong, and maybe Soul kind of feels for Chimere and what he's gone through. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's only 2 episodes though, so it's like, and there's a lot left on the table, literally, in regards to
she's on the table.
May's on the
so I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I foresee that this next episode does have to be the flashback episode. I think, given especially the apparently, I saw somewhere that the director for next week's episode is Kogonada, who directed episode 3, the flashback episode. So you could almost imagine they maybe shot both of these at the same time, and
they would for purpose of ease,
practicality, and everything. But we'll finally get to the other side. I was trying to like ruminate on the idea of like whose perspective we get to see it through, because obviously this is going to be Soul's retelling of what happened.
Oh, that might be Soul. Yeah, that's a good idea too.
That's the tricky part. But I love what you brought up, and also what we've kind of naturally been talking about in terms of the dyad situation, where we got to see hints of Osha having brief flashes or visions or understandings of exactly what May is going through at a specific time in the last episode, which is what causes her and Yord to turn around, or really pushes her to like convince him to. So I'm thinking that, yes, we get to see Soul giving that perspective to May, but Osha experiences it through the helmet. So she
Yes.
puts the helmet on, gets that Force vision, because that's so Star Wars, right? Especially for a character at this point in her arc, to have like a Force vision. I think that's what we're getting, and that's how we're able to then connect the two and sort of have them both understand and experience, what happened that night, at the same time, even though they are, in completely separate parts of the galaxy. I think that would be really cool. One thing that I'm sort of thinking is that Vernestra, as much as it sort of feels like Soul is the big bad right now, I think Vernestra is the big bad. I think
Vernestra is. I don't understand why everyone thinks Soul's the big bad guy.
No, because this episode, especially when she's cuffed to the table and he's sort of talking, the music gives that sort of vibe.
I guess so.
I'm not so much saying that like that is what it is. I'm saying that's what they want us to think.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
it's definitely sleight of hand.
And I think Vernestra is going to. I think it's going to be a little bit less of him being the bad guy, but more like him being the fall guy. He's going to be the one that gets blamed for the deaths of the Jedi, so that they can hide the fact that there might be Sith or there might be powerful enemies of the Jedi in general. Again, going back to the line, "Peace is a lie," right? Or an acolyte kills the dream, right? I think these are very, very important lines that will sort of flow throughout and really kind of get to the heart of what's going on with the Jedi Order. What I don't foresee is how they're going to do all this in 2 episodes, because you have to imagine, right? Like, yes, we're going to get a lot of.
Well, next week's episode is going to be a flashback.
Right, we're going to get a lot of explanation.
Really just one episode.
Right, we're not get a lot of explanation, but not moving forward from where we are now necessarily in terms of like what's going to happen.
I would hope, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I would hope that episode, that finale, is at least an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
Cool.
Or like it's going to be
45 minutes before credits. Give us that. Because this episode was like 32 minutes with credits.
Oh, like before credits. Before the credits? Yeah, because the credits are like 3 minutes. That might be a problem with the show altogether, though, right? Just what it's trying to do.
So let's get to our overall thoughts on this episode. I think one of the things that I've been noticing with this watch club in particular is I think we've really focused in on, yes, we celebrate the performances when they're needed to be celebrated, or the writing moments when they needed to be celebrated, and we sort of don't harp too much on the criticisms as we go throughout. So let's get to our overall thoughts. I'd love to know sort of how this episode worked for you, and what were your criticisms and what were your positives.
Well, I'm pretty positive on this episode.
Good.
But I guess what I'll talk about, because I haven't really talked about, is what didn't work. And I think a lot of that has to do with the constant shifting around in this episode. The way moments are broken up, even the way you had to like restructure this watch club to kind of move us through without bouncing around too much. Like, I know why you had to do that, because we moved around way too much. And I think it as I was hinting about it a couple minutes ago, was I think that's just a problem with this show. And I think we've seen it in the way these larger, maybe more movie-centric ideas get sort of cut down into TV, but really cut down. Like they're fitting into a formulaic, here's a 8-episode, 30 to 40 minute limit. And that is a constraint in itself. And I think that's why we're getting things like really clunky pacing and constant even just characters shifting their motives so fast, is because they have to, for the purpose of the story that they're trying to tell in these 8 episodes over a 35 minute episode. Like the first episode I think was the longest thus far, maybe the second one too, but after that they're like 34 minutes, and that's like you said, that's with credits included in those runtimes. So I just think it's a byproduct of the show. It's the same thing we kind of talked about with Obi-Wan to a certain degree. But like you said, there's a lot that still works. The idea of maybe just kind of taking a bit of a beat after last week's episode to kind of unravel Chimere a little bit more, because this was like version 3 of Chimere. Right, we saw the quirky Chimere. We saw the stranger, fucking unleash hell in last week's episode, and now we see this sort of vulnerable, very calm and cool. He's wearing white, and not black. He's not obviously in his I guess fighting attire,
or he's
if you
wearing
will.
nothing. Yep.
Or he's wearing
Yeah.
nothing, right? He was that's a perfect opportunity to talk about that. The mystery around his character and what he was doing with how he was talking with Osha and stuff like that. I think that was really insightful. And again, Soul, Lee Jung Jae as Soul, those moments, as short as they were and as far and few, he made them work. And I think obviously the biggest moment being when he's just on his own and he smashes the console, and even when he smashes the console, like that's not Jedi. So it's refreshing to see that sort of iconography of a Jedi character in Soul. Everything we kind of got in this episode really sets up a lot for these last two episodes to carry. And again, given what I was mentioning before about the show kind of being stuck in this like clunky pacing, rapid, slow storytelling, I just wonder how the last two episodes are really going to deliver a satisfactory closure to what could be, like you're saying, maybe only a season one. But yeah, I think parts worked for me. Maybe I'm just sort of used to the formula at this point with this show. Kind of like I've tempered my expectations a little bit. Right?
You're like tempered cortosis in a helmet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're just
refined.
Yeah, and you're just going to deflect all the criticisms that come towards the No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but I and then just again, the acting across the board is fantastic, and we really are honing in on some great characters in Star Wars that are being written right now, and Manny Jacinto is he's incredible. Like again, it's just like the third version of him that we've seen in this show. There's so much to explore with his character, and I really enjoy him.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think this episode, I'm there for a lot of that. I think this episode had a lot of really interesting ideas, some really intriguing, interesting dialogue, and one or two really good emotional moments. Some again good acting, but I think ultimately it felt short, like for me, in its runtime, and just it fell short in the sense of what it accomplished. I think one thing that it did really, really, like it was the right decision, and it's something that I mentioned on last week's episode that I was upset that they weren't doing, is it did actually let us sit with Osha as we see her mind changing and the inception of ideas entering her head, which is what I've been wanting to have, right? I've been wanting to sort of see and understand more of why these characters are making the decisions that they're making. But that said, it's just so clunky in terms of its pacing, and I really didn't connect with the episode overall. And I think because of the fact that 2 out of the 3 storylines, to me, felt like they could have been summed up into one scene. Realistically, I really don't think we needed to spend that much time with Basil running around, and that much time even with Vernestra. I think it could have just been her going to Kofar and having that scene with Mog and killing that bug, and that could have been it. I don't think we really needed too much more, and I think it just felt like we had such great momentum last week, and this episode, while I understand what you're saying is it was acting as sort of a come down off that high, it just felt like nothing really moved forward, and they just wasted the time that they had with Vernestra and to a certain degree Soul and May. Like again, I think diving into that character and giving us that acting moment with JJ was awesome, but I still think we could have gotten that and then just sort of really honed in and focused more on the Chimere and Osha stuff. I just think, like you're saying, there's a misbalance of setting up and revealing in this series overall, and this episode felt like just more waiting, more build up, and just, I don't know, I just felt like we could have been getting more understanding into these additional characters' motivations. I think there's just a bit too much filling in the blanks at this point when it comes to their decisions and their motivations, and to me, as fun as I'm having dissecting this stuff in a watch club, watching it it's starting to get a little bit frustrating as I'm kind of going through that. And I don't think I'm the only one that's feeling that, even though I am enjoying the show. I think there are other people that are enjoying the show that are still sort of getting frustrated with where we're at in episode
I'm with
6.
you there. I'm with you there.
I still think it's a great premise. I'm enjoying, like we've been talking about, the performances. I am digging the music, obviously the combat, the era. But I just really want to be on the journey with May and Osha, and I still don't feel like I am. I still don't feel like I get why they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And again, I think this episode started to resolve that, but it might just be a little bit too late, and I just wanted more from that storyline. So yeah, I think getting to the end of the episode or just near the end of the episode and hearing Soul yet again for what I think might be the 4th or 5th time say, I'm going to tell you what happened. And then they just cut. To me, it was just so disappointing. And I understand how shows work and that they're going to do that in the next episode. But it's just not, I don't know. I really want them to bring us back to that energy that we had in episode 5. And I'm hoping episode 7 will do that.
But I guess I think maybe episode 7 in terms from an action perspective is definitely going to deliver what you're expecting. But like, I don't know. I feel like, you need an episode like this, right? That kind of will take that beat down and allow us to kind of reveal, because so much was revealed last week in regards to Chimere and his capabilities, and he just slayed a whole bunch of Jedi. So to spend a little more time with his character is an interesting.
Sure, but then don't cut back every
follow-up.
4 minutes.
No, I think it should have. I think it should. I don't
Basil
think we
running
should have seen
around
that, and I think
and doing karate.
Yeah, exactly. Basil was in it more, and like honestly,
Yeah.
Basil was in it more than I would say Vernestra was, because
Sure.
I actually didn't mind these things, because I think again it sets up her as being the bad guy, something that she's kind of trying to conceal or get under wraps. But like there was way too much Basil, and I just wonder. I hope they can figure it out. Like I really do, because there is really good stuff here. It's just not all meshing well together.
Yeah. But that is it for this week's episode of Watch Club for Star Wars: The Acolyte. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you like to listen to your podcast, if you haven't already. And if you want to write into the show with your thoughts or your predictions on the shows we cover in Watch Club, well, you don't need to go swimming with a bunch of anteater ducks. Instead, Justin, can you let our lovely acolytes know how they can reach us by holomessage?
Well, they can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach out to us on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, at GeekcentricYT, or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric.
Keep in mind, we also have our Discord, which you can join us using the link in our description. Let's keep the conversation going, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know your thoughts on this episode, and also, what did you think of that rockin' bod that we got to see in this episode? We also have a ton of other great episodes covering the latest in movies and TV shows, including our recent spoiler-filled, yes, Chef, you heard that right, spoiler-filled discussion of The Bear Season 3. We give all our thoughts on the entire season as well as our final score, so definitely check that out. We also have our spoiler-free reviews for House of the Dragon Season 2, Inside Out 2, The Boys Season 4, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Doctor Who, and Star Wars Tales of the Empire. We also have some great interviews out now, like our most recent interviews with the Canadian animators from Pixar, who worked on Inside Out 2. Justin had a wonderful, lovely chat with both of them about their roles at Pixar, the emotions that are driving their consoles, and their favorite Pixar movies. So be sure to check that out, as well as all of our interviews, both here on your podcast service of choice or over on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. Give us a 5-star review. Give us a like. Give us a comment. We'd love to hear all about your thoughts on the podcast. The hot geek summer is going to continue to get hotter. I think we're going to get maybe sweaty under like a red suit potentially in the future. Maybe get stabbed a few times You know,
We might also get whipped up into a twister.
we could get whipped up into it. Well, dude, with the weather the way things have been lately here in Ontario, like that's a very real possibility. But you know, we've also got our watch club for episode 7 coming out next week. We might be joined by a special guest. We will see. We're working on something. But Justin, thank you so much for joining me for this watch club. And as we say, you're with me,
And I'm with you.
always one.
But born as two.